everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Uh, the topic this afternoon is a really important one. And we specifically have labeled it violence prevention as opposed to anti-violence. Violence prevention, just oppose the criminal justice system. And I say that because all of us, I'm sure, are aware of the murder hmm, of Robert at the Marcy Correctional Facility, which seems like yesterday to me. That's a big problem. Big problem. So our focus on violence prevention, upstream work, is to make sure that our young and not so young don't encounter the justice system unless it's just saying good morning or good afternoon. I'm going to make way, and I want to introduce our moderator for this afternoon. The just stay in the trenches, work 28 hours a day, even though she's retired. Kathy Thomas. Good afternoon, Kathy. Welcome and thank you. Unmute yourself. Thank you. I'm just handing it off to you and just going into the background. We know you're going to take care of things as you always do.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood, and good afternoon, everyone. Um, I am honored to be able to serve as the moderator for this milestone conference, 60 Years in Action. This is a very important topic, very near and dear to my heart, violence prevention and the criminal justice. We have a very esteemed panelist, which I cannot wait to hear from, and it's so good to see all of you. Of community pillars, those that I know that are really have their foot to the ground and doing the work. With the bringing a very diverse of experience, knowledge, and passion. Before I introduce you, I want to share very briefly the mayor put out the portal, the database on how crime overall has dropped. A 30% overall that has spanned in every category within the second half of 2024. I find that to be amazing. And one of the things, and I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look in the portal, but the portal is available to anyone. But to see the numbers and how they've dropped, and as the comment says, sometimes it seems like crime is not dropping. But when you look at the data speaks the truth. So we can't fight against the data. So I encourage each and every one of you to take a look at the portal, but kudos to the partnerships of the mayor and the community at large in addressing violence. So as we get started, I want to just introduce Mr. Isaiah Santiago, Mr. Miguel Powell, Mr. Tony Jordan, and Mr. Vincent French. Due to somewhat of a scheduling, we're going to start with Mr. Isaiah. As we know, Mr. Isaiah is a student and needs to get to class. So we're going to put Mr. Isaiah, we're going to start with his questions first. And Isaiah, what do you think social media has an impact on? Do you think social media has an impact on violence? And if so, how could government, city, county, Rochester City School District, Rochester Police Department, etc., leverage social media to prevent or reduce violence, particularly amongst our youth?
I will say certainly I believe that social media does have an impact when it comes to violence that we have been seeing in the recent years of our young people. I can think back to many conversations with the young people that I've gained relationships with, and even my younger siblings, and to hear a lot of the beef and the argument begin on social media, it's certainly a factor in the issue. But I believe that when we have conversations about the government and RPD and different sources coming in to social media to be a helping factor, I think that that comes with allowing the young people, and certainly when we're trying to focus on young people, is allowing the young people to do that. Paying these young people to come into the organization and help with the social media presence that really promotes peace and promotes conflict resolution and emotional intelligence. But I believe that that's something that can be at the responsibility of the young people if they're given the power to do so in these organizations. But if I can also share, social media is a presence, but what the organization is known by is always relational. And so social media can be, a presence for people to engage. But there's also a relational aspect when we speak about different systems of government getting involved in preventing violence. And I believe that the first thing that has to be focused on is the relationship that we're having with the young people. I remember speaking at an event, a Faith in Blue event, and I remember, people speaking about how young people have to respect the police officers and have to respect their elders. And what I very quickly shared is that respect and relationship isn't built off of fear. And I think a lot of times we forget about the relationship that's in the community and try to substitute that with social media, which is not possible. And so the first step is to make sure that you get your relationships right. And the second step is to include young people in the solution as they know the problems that our young people are facing. But when you do that, ensure that you're paying them for the work that they're doing, but also that you are listening to their perspective and you are listening and not just listening. Listening is step one, but showing action in your departments behind the criticism that young people may have, which is sometimes the status quo of these organizations.
I
Back to you.
heard Dr. Melanie Silas also referenced about the importance of listening to the youth voice. And I hear, as you saying, that is important, as they are very important part of our community and very intelligent and have lots of answers, but the respect, as you say, goes both ways. So they have to feel and build those trusted relationships. Thank you. I'm going to move to your next question. At last week's youth panel, where you were also a panelist, the topic of mental health was discussed at length. How can mental health factor into violence prevention and what kinds of resources should be promoted?
Mental health is one of the mental health, social emotional understanding and awareness and intelligence, um, understanding the things that we are facing and being able to get a grasp on it can be one of the root solutions to preventing violence. And I say that because one thing that I've experienced, even in my journey from I'm 20 years old now, and having an opportunity to experience both sides of life where I'm advocating for better, but also at one point in my life being involved in things that weren't beneficial to myself. One thing that I've noticed in my process is that I was a hurt young person, and the best way that I could understand my hurt and deal with my hurt was to either temporarily satisfy it with a substance, with a behavior, with fighting, with getting in trouble, or the only way that I knew how to experience or express the hurt that I felt was to hurt other people. And when we're able to give our young people support and understanding on who they are and how to process the traumas that they face, the hurt that they face, the emotions that they deal with, is really part of the solution to fixing our issue with violence. It starts at the home. It starts at the home, but we can also give services in our community. We can also give services from our government to also support this. And that comes through mentorship. Some of my best lessons came from mentors that I've experienced with. And allowing mentorship to be there, because there's nothing like somebody who's experienced what you experience and can tell you that there's still life after him. And so we can really push mental health services as far as counseling, as far as mentorships, as far as really just a community that's embracing our young people for who they are. And who they are isn't what social media is saying that they are, isn't what the media is saying that they are, isn't what, some people are expressing as a new generation as. They're young people with purpose and an opportunity. And I believe if we can wrap our arms around them and give them the services that they need, like the counseling, like the mentorship, like the support from their family, like the support from their community, they can truly have, we can truly see their opportunity and their potential, and we can give them the opportunity to get to where they have the potential for. And every young person has potential. I got to where I am as far as advocacy, but I was advocating when I was younger. It was just looked at in a different way compared to how I advocate now. And so every young person has a potential, but we have to be able to really love on them and show them that potential and that they have a better option of life. And so I believe if we can give them mentorship and show them their emotional intelligence and give them the services that they need, we can really get to a place where we can really attack violence in a different way. And I think that's what today we need. We need innovative social movements. We need innovative movements in our government because we have a new generation dealing with new issues, but having to live in a system that has old generational status quos and old policies and processes. So that's my spill.
Well, I just want to follow up with you on that because there's a number of initiatives like employment. Employment has been named as one of the lack of employment for one of the issues that contribute to youth and violence. So based on what you know, what you see, and the initiatives that have taken place through with the recreation centers and also through the mayor and Rochester Works, how do you feel that a continuum of that or additional to that will continue to combat violence within our young people, amongst our young people?
Absolutely. I think employment is really one of the other things that we have to focus on when it comes to fixing the issues that we live in this city, and not just employment, but on top of employment, we have to be able to focus on ensuring that people are getting paid right in this city, as the city has a huge poverty percentage. Holding these businesses accountable that gain from Rochester, but doesn't pay back to Rochester that for the citizens that they steal from or that they take from. But we also have to make sure with these employment opportunities that they are employment opportunities that the young people are interested in, something that they want to do for the rest of their lives. Because and not for the rest of their lives, but a career path. Because when we're able to do that, we're able to set young people up through a pipeline of success. And when they're able to get paid, they don't have to go out and do certain things that they have to do to get money. And so I think employment is important. It's good to see the programs that's currently out, through the mayor. But I can also say that there's ways that it could be tweaked and there's ways that it could be bettered for our young generation. And there's ways that we can create pipelines of success. We just have to do these programs right.
I appreciate that. Okay. My next question will go to Mr. Jordan. You have a long-standing history of working with youth from various backgrounds, some of who've been involved in the justice system. What are some examples of successful violence prevention programs that you have encountered, and what, in your opinion, has made them successful?
You gotta hit that mute button, Tony.
Forgot to unmute. It'll get you every now and then. Thank you for the question, Ms. Thomas. Good to see you. I think the thing that makes any program successful, there's some core things that have to happen. You have to have a champion for that cause, somebody who holds everyone to a high standard of service. You have to have parents who support the program, or at least support the work that you're doing. You have to have community involved. But most importantly, you have to win the hearts and minds of the children. Some of the programs that I've seen, and I've worked in the community a long time. And, I guess I would just say this. People might fuss at me or say, this is contrary. I've seen a lot of programs. Rochester has had lots of curriculums, lots of programs, lots of this from all over. We've created some, we borrowed some worked really well, some didn't. But the ones that have worked have always had the element of caring, strong, supportive staff. They've always been able to make positive connections and relationships with young people. Isaiah mentioned relationships. It's very important that we build relationships with young people that can overcome, and in some cases is why some children move the way they do. I don't want to disappoint Miss or Mr. Some of the examples though are, we used to have a program, and so this program was for kids who were already kind of, getting involved in violence and things like that. It was the Goodfellas and the Divas. For folks who might remember that, it was a
Yes.
program that the city ran with a wonderful lady named Bev Jackson. Bev had a way of being your mom, being the person in charge of the room, and also speaking to your spirit by feeding you, by putting an arm around you. What Bev and the team did was they recruited credible, caring adults from our community. She got people off the couch to come and volunteer and spend time with young people. And then that would be my other, like if I was giving you suggestions for building a great program, it would be that the staff and volunteers put time in. You got to give something to get something. If you want to get something from young people, if you want to get the idea that young people will work to not be involved in violence or in the justice system, you're going to have to give some time, some love, some heart. And I would say I learned that from Mr. Underwood. It's okay to say love. We don't like to say love on anything, but if your program don't have some element of love for what you're doing, whether it's sports, I love football, I love basketball, and I love the kids that play. I love working with kids in a dance program, art, or a business, whatever it is. If you don't love what you're doing and love on our children, the kids aren't going to stay connected. The parents aren't going to be curious as to what's going on. What they did was unbelievable. They took children who were all on a path that was not good and redirected them. But once again, it wasn't a magic bullet. It was over time and over building these relationships. A couple summers ago, I was involved with a program. I was working at the city of Rochester. I'm sorry, at the city school district, and we were collaborating with the city of Rochester and some other community folks. So that to me would be the other thing: collaboration, programs that have good collaboration, and no one has all the answers or all the skills. So if we're going to develop and build good programs as a community, we have what we need, but we don't always utilize it together to offer programs that will make a difference. Anyway, the program, we did a MBK Summer Institute with 7th, 8th graders. The cool thing is we had Untrapped Ministries, which is Justin Morris, which is just a community-based program. He collaborated with the Center for Dispute Settlement. So I'm naming folks. Folks can be mad at me. I've been around long enough. They can just be mad at me.
It is what it is. Yes.
When Jerome calls me and hits me with something that as serious as this, folks, y'all can be mad at me if you want to. But we also had North Star Rites of Passage, which was also a grassroots private company who focused on culture and developing young people through understanding who they really are. So the students were in this program. They learned how to avoid conflict or unnecessary violence. So that would be my other element that all programs should have. They should build skills in our young people. It's okay to talk about, like, listen, you don't want to get involved with this, that, or the other, particularly the justice systems. And we should not be building children who are afraid of the justice system, but understand how it works and how it affects us in our community. We should not build youth who are afraid. We should build them so they learn how to thrive and navigate our community, and they should be able to do so without the threat of violence. So this Summer Institute, the thing that we did that I liked, and I get to kind of say I was a participant, was we started with a parent meeting. We offered their parents an opportunity. And certainly Isaiah hit a key point. We gave the students a little stipend for the time. 7th and 8th graders are trying to work. They're young. They think they need their own money. We were able to provide that for this program. They need champions. So some of the staff involved were real community champions, people who go beyond the clock, people who actually will pick up the phone when you call after 8 o'clock kind of people. Once again, I mentioned the cultural perspective. You know, people think some of these topics are heavy. They don't want to hear about our experience as African American people. People get afraid of these things. We got to stop being afraid of things that we need to know so that we can prevent our children from harm. So in this program, they were exposed to cultural opportunities. They were able to look at history. They were able to understand who they are and be able to kind of, you know, understand what they can be because of where we came from. It was amazing. And then, you know, we had other opportunities for youth to learn about finance and all the other things. And the attendance rate was amazing. It was 85, 90% or whatever it was. And I think what made that program great was it was that triangle. It was family, community, and school. We operated out of School 58. School staff was involved. So we had that complete triangle. So, you know, some of the programs that I've seen that are successful, they have those elements. They have a champion. They connect with the parents in some way. We can't avoid that. We must make sure our parents understand, know what their children are involved, and partner with them. And certainly, you know, once again, staff that are committed and know what they need to do, know how to do it, and have the resources and tools to do so.
And another key piece to that is food.
Oh, yes.
Bev was the best. There was a full meal. So in order to get them there, they knew they were going to get a full meal. So the food and the love, the passion, all of that, because it goes beyond the 5 o'clock. And youth know when you're genuine. So that genuinity that you and others have exhibited, that's a key element that to some of these programs that have been successful. All of what you named, rites of passage. Yes, you can say one more. Yes.
Can I tell you the secret? And Ms.
Yes.
Thomas was at the table for the Divas. People like her came, even though they worked a full day, she would show up. And once again, we call it breaking bread, but we need to break bread with our children on these tough topics, on these situations. You know, a sport can have these tough conversations and build skills of, you know, conflict management and things like that. But once again, it was all of those things coming together. Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Our next question will go to Mr. French. Your bio indicates that you are the creator of the Monroe County Public Defender's Office, Defenders of Tomorrow program, designed to inspire and equip young people to meaningfully engage with the legal and justice systems. Tell us more about the program and how it could be used as a tool of violence prevention.
Good morning, everyone, or sorry, good afternoon. Hello to you, one and all. Hello also to Miss Kathy Thomas as well. Before I start, I just want to give a shout out. You know, you've been an instrumental part of my life and my coming up in your previous role at the Catholic Family Center. And so I just want to say, you know, thank you for all that you continuously do for the community as a community leader. Thank you. But to answer your question, this is something I'm very excited about, and I'm trying to temper my excitement so I can answer very, very clearly and slowly so my words don't get jumbled. But, you know, the Defenders of Tomorrow program was designed to inspire and equip young people to engage meaningfully with the legal justice system. And it came essentially from lived experience, right? We always talk about, oh, you know, you're such a wonderful kid. Wish I could have met you on better terms, right? And, you know, one of the things as an educator, it's our job, you know, in domain 2 of creating and building relationships is to create that environment. Like that's our job is to create an environment that's conducive for the upbringing of all people that we serve here in New York, in Monroe County, in New York State, and across the nation. And so, you know, I created that pipeline program as a way to engage and demystify how the system works and operates, while also showing our young students, the participants, how they can also advocate for change from within or outside the system. You know, as an educator, you know, we often talk about in various spaces too, that school to prison pipeline. right? And so with that in mind, I wanted to create a school to career or school to advocacy pipeline, right? And so the Defense of Tomorrow geared towards high school students between 10th and 12th grade students right now. We launched a program this past fall as a pilot with Greece Odyssey Academy. We're also looking to reach back to RCSD as well to connect with Monroe High School with Jason Muhammad. Very exciting opportunity to be in this space. We've been doing this work kind of ad hocly. This program has essentially been created to kind of codify our efforts into us into one kind of place. But we've been doing this since I started in this office, pushing into Franklin, School Without Walls, Edison Tech, obviously, and just being in those spaces, northeast at the Charlotte building there, and again, just pushing in, engaging with the community. As a violence prevention tool, right? This program focuses on obviously empowering through knowledge, right? And so by understanding the mechanisms that often marginalize the communities and the participants gain the valuable tools necessary to challenge the inequities, right? Reducing the cycle of violence stemming from disenfranchisement, right? We have to give our students and young people purpose, right? And this does that. It gives that sense of self-efficacy. It allows individuals to know that their voice has power even when it's shaky. I listened to Isaiah Santiago and also to Mr. Tony as well, and we talk about mentorship. This program provides that aspect of mentorship. Right, we have to let students know that we see them, that we hear them, and that their voice matters even when it's shaky. But at the same time, too, that talking about identity is important, like who they are and whose they are. And we have to continuously at every turn do that work. I know the mayor's office has a mentoring program. I also participated in Men of Impact with folks at Thomas P. Ryan Rec Center there as well, next to School 33. And so that mentorship is happening, but we also have to continuously build that capacity within the families. Right, we talk about meeting with the families and getting them involved. Right, it can't just be a top-down approach at all. We have to provide purpose. We have to reach out to the parents, reach out to the students, have them see themselves in this work. Right, this thing that's happening is not happening to you, but it's happening with you. Right, inviting them to the tables, have those advisory boards. Right, just kind of de-siloing ourselves and working with other organizations within the community. With this program, we've had students coming through from various schools, but again, going to law library, seeing how those things intersect, going to the Hall of Justice, and then also connecting with local organizations as well too. So it's really been, I can paddle on and wax poetically, but it's a very exciting moment for us. Again, it's just a pilot program right now. We started in September with Carrie Gant, and we're really excited about the outcome thus far.
Thank you. I was very impressed when I did read about the program, and as you stated, purpose. I'll just say real quickly that sometimes when you don't know where you fit, because we know that the Monroe County, the public defender office does not necessarily look like the community, but when there's purpose and young people know that, hey, I can be that as well. So I appreciate that program and understanding that it's just a pilot, but I'm hoping that it will continue on because it is a very powerful program. So
definitely, when I first, I always appreciate, when I don't have to necessarily explain something to people, when I first presented this program to Julie Sianka, her eyes was like wide, because when they developed this is a new role as diversity coordinator here in the Public Defender's Office. I know it's not the question, but I think it's still worth explaining to those that are in attendance here. But when it's never the car, it's always the driver. And so, you put the jobs on paper, but then once that person gets in, they bring their unique aspect to it and kind of make it their home and then inhabit the role in its own way. And so this role was just kind of workplace diversity. But I'm an educator. And so my job is to always reach back. And if it wasn't for the advocacy of this office, I wouldn't be who I am today. Right, plain and simple. So, I'm coming at this lens in this position from lived experience. Right, at 12, I wanted to become an educator, but at 16, I found myself spiraling and falling into those traps. And it was the Public Defender's Office and its attorneys that worked hard every single day to advocate, that allowed me to spiral up and out of those situations, but didn't realize my dream. So, I want to create that same kind of outcome, but more intentional.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Our next question will go to Mr. McQuell Powell. Mr. McQuell, you've been very busy, and I've been really impressed because I'm a social worker as well. So a person after your own heart. So You've been busy the past years completing your master's degree in social work and running the reentry program, which is focused on positive pathways for formerly incarcerated individuals. In your work and activism, what are you seeing and hearing as it relates to this topic on violence prevention and criminal justice?
Good question. Thank you so much for having me. And congrats on 60 years for Action for a Better Community serving Rochester. I think that when we talk about violence prevention and we talk about crime in our city, and as a social worker, we have to always remember that this topic is a complex issue. It's never one thing that you can really point to say, I think this is where violence is coming from. It's so many variables and so many factors that go into the violence that we see. In terms of prevention, what I think that we can benefit from doing is trying to address it while individuals are still young, while they are adolescents. And speaking from my own personal experience, that's when it happened for me. When I was between 12 or 14 or 15 years old, those was the ages that I seen my mentality start to change from a kid to now I'm doing things that a 12 or 13, 14-year-old shouldn't be able to do. But what I noticed if I look back on my life is that there was no intervention. I think the biggest indicator to criminality starting younger is those juvenile delinquent type of behaviors, fighting, aggressive behavior, threatening types of behavior. And for me, I was displaying some of those things, but there was no intervention. When I was coming up in Monroe Middle School back in the days, there was no social workers. I can't remember ever talking to a social worker or a mental health therapist, no matter what I was doing, no matter if I was getting suspended or any of those things. So I think that we need to do a better job gauging or assessing those early signs of juvenile delinquent behavior, because you got to think if a child is 12 or 13 years old and they come to school fighting a lot, something not right. Something is going on with that child and it needs to be assessed. I think also in terms of prevention, we should provide more resources to parents who might have or raising children that's at an age to where they are displaying these types of behaviors, maybe running away from home or getting suspended from school, and the parent just need resources. They can't control the child anymore. I see a lot of that happening as well. So we need to try to figure out a way of how we can provide resources to children. And lastly, inevitably, certain behavior do lead to individuals being incarcerated, like myself. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Reentry and Community Development Center, is because I noticed when I came home from prison that there wasn't too many resources for people recently released from jail or prison, right? So I think that the criminal justice system could do a better job of providing resources while people are still incarcerated, as opposed to waiting until they come home and then they have to go and try to apply for DHS, which takes 45 days for a person to get their case open, or try to find housing after they come home. Some of these things should be in place, because what happens is if you come home and you don't have those resources, 9 times out of 10, a person resort back to what they know best. And if a person has a violent history, they're more prone to exhibit that behavior again. One of the things that worked for me was having that support system and family, but everybody don't come home to a support system or family. So those are just a few things to which I feel like can help with prevention if you addressing it at an early age, helping some of the parents that don't have the resources to deal with children that start acting out, for lack of a better term, and also our criminal justice system preparing people for coming home so that they're less likely to reoffend.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question to that, when you talk about specific resources, is there something that comes to mind for you for parents?
Yeah, just an outlet to even let somebody know that their child is uncontrollable. You know, who do a parent or a mother or a single mother reach out to in the first place to say, hey, I can no longer control my child. You're not listening to me. You're running away. So I just think that providing that outlet and also having some type of response to it without judgment. I see somebody saying a parent should just be able to say, I tried and I did everything that I can, but my child is at an age to where they're no longer listening to me. And I think that a parent should just have some outlets to even share that for starters.
I appreciate that. One of the comments was without judgment, and many people agree with that. So I think that's an opportunity for us as a community to continue to work with our parents to provide that support and keep peace without judgment and without fear, because relationships are important. Trusting relationships are equally important for parents to have that, to be able to reach out for support. So we're going to go with our second round of questions. And I'm going to start with Mr. French. In poor and marginalized communities, it is not unusual to hear that the criminal justice system is working perfectly based on the number of Black and Brown people who are or have been incarcerated. What incentive is there, if any, within the system to reduce crime and violence? Is violence and crime prevention even discussed in the district attorney's or public defender's office?
Thank you so much for that question. And so this question is kind of a nuanced question as it touches on both the systemic critique and then also the goals of justice reform. You know, it is true that that phrase that says the system is working perfectly, right, is often acknowledgement, of the ways that the system was designed to function. This is disproportionately impacting Black and Brown communities. You know, growing up on the northeast side of Hudson Avenue on St. Jacob Street, you know, we've heard that. We grew up with that, right? It definitely there's recognition that highlights the need to reform rather than for complacency. But within the justice system, the discussion about crime and violence reduction is continuously ongoing, but it must go beyond just statistics, right? It's not enough to just simply count the arrests or the convictions. I think we need to ask those deeper questions, right? Why are crimes happening? I know it was kind of mentioned earlier, right? It's really doing that needs assessment. Why does the crimes happen? Why are the systems continuously failing? And then, you know, even here at the Public Defender's Office, we do focus on the intersections of systemic injustices and individual accountability, right? Our approach here at the office emphasizes addressing the underlying causes of crime, the lack of education, obviously poverty, I mentioned it earlier, but those go hand in hand. And then just the trauma or the untreated mental health issues that are impacting our clients. And, you know, obviously advocating for policies and then also just looking to mitigating those factors. But then also, you know, there's a shift towards restorative and preventive measures, recognizing that the public safety is not just about policing issues, but a community issue. Right, there needs to be a collective. We need to take ownership. It's not a us thing. It's a we thing. Right, this is a we problem that we all need to address. We all need to see ourselves in this problem in order to take ownership of it. Right, to truly reduce the crime and violence in our community, I saw earlier, there needs to be a holistic approach that includes equitable access to services, opportunities, and then systems of support that prevent crime before it even starts. Right, again, I heard it mentioned earlier. I think it was Mike Quell talking about at a very young age, you need to start early. You know, my son's 9. I talk up to him about now. I talk to him about that stuff now. And, you know, there's no subject that's off matter. You just have to make sure that it's age and developmentally appropriate.
Thank you. Our next question will go back to Mr. Jordan. How can communities be mobilized to participate actively in violence prevention efforts?
I think one thing that we have to do as a community is do a better job collaborating and communicating what we have to offer. Because, you know, as Mr. Powell said, I can't tell you the number of times that a parent is like, what and where and how today, because that's how it is. You know, when a parent has exhausted everything, where do I go? Who can I talk to? And you know, being in this work as long as I have, sometimes the response time a day could be a day too long when a parent is in crisis with their child. I think, we got to work as a community on language about, and the cultural pieces to how we talk and teach our young people about violence and how to protect themselves and be safe. The old school mentality of like, if somebody hits you, hit them back. Um, that was simple because back in those days, things were a little more simple. To Mr. French's point, we got to build skills in our young people so that they can not only deal with conflict and violence in our community, but there's on-the-job conflict. There's conflict everywhere you go, business, work, play. So our young people need to know how to skillfully navigate these situations. I think youth development is one of those terms in our community that's used loosely. We used to really be big on that. I think we got to, as a community, understand what youth development is and what skills youth need development, but also building on the skills that they already have. And once again, we're engaging families engaging school engaging community. All of us working together, saying the same thing, so that we can achieve a goal of raising our children and giving them the best opportunities in the future possible. I would just say, in terms of information, I'll put a shameless plug out to the community. We are working on a resource directory for youth and families. So I'm hoping that will come to fruition. I can tell you, networking and communication piece, Ms. Thomas, that's all you. We still do our network meetings that you helped us start. The network folks are here today. God bless
Awesome.
you. Agencies don't like to take time. Everybody's busy doing their job, but we need to come together so that we can understand what these resources are. When a parent needs help and you are the person they come into and you don't have the answer, part of that is us as a community communicating. But we are trying to build a tool. The county and city used to have something called the Youth Yellow Pages. We're trying to answer that charge, and we're coming up with an online directory. So that's a couple of things I think we can do to mobilize. We have resources. We got people. We need to work on our language. We need to build skills in our young people.
Can I just add a follow-up question in regards to funding that to address some of those resources that are so much needed? And as you mentioned, parent involvement is a key piece, but can you just speak a little bit about funding for those types of programs?
Yeah, and once again, the panelists have already mentioned it. One of the notes that I had was a lot of good programs go away because in most cases, the data is lagging. That's a fancy term. I'm not a data person, but the data lags. The program is doing good. The attendance is okay. The kids are well. So we off to something else, the next hot new ideal of program. So once again, funding for things that work don't always get funded because funders are looking for this, they're looking for that. And what our children really need is to be well, to be socially, emotionally well. And any program can achieve that if they are practicing good youth development. But often programs that do that well don't get funded, or programs that don't look like what the funders are exactly describing. I know there's a big movement in our community to understand our grassroots programs better so we can fund them. So, shout out to GRASA, the city, the county, and the local funders that are taking time to understand what programs really make a difference, that build healthy relationships, that are able to reach out to our parents and collaborate with them, not talk down to them. Thank you, Mr. Powell. Collaboration is the key. But funding is an issue. Youth sports never hardly gets funded. And it could be, it made a difference in my life. Without a coach telling me, you doing this, you ain't going there, I probably would have went there and I probably would have did this, and who knows, but that's a challenge to fund good programs. And as a community, we have to step up and say to our funders, that we want these grassroots. They may not give you all the data that you're looking for today, but we know, Mr. French and Mr. Powell and I are sitting here today, and so people touched us because they were involved in these different systems that don't often get funded.
And I'll follow up with that is that because they're looking for evidence-based, and some of what works is not evidence-based.
Right.
It's grassroots, kind of hands-on is what works to reach the population, the youth, the families that we need to reach. So
And I'll say one other quick term: evidence-based costs money.
yes, it does.
And
Yes,
when
it
you
does.
have money, it's hard to get to that whole level of collection of data and processing and record attendance. So once again, you can price good programs out of business.
And I think that has been longstanding within our community because we've had a number of programs, but we lose funding. So Mr. Underwood had put in the chat that he's had a conversation with Mr. Bello about possible funding for some of these programs. So hopefully that's what we'll have some positive outcome on that conversation. So Mr. McQuell. Funding for violence prevention and strength-based youth development programs like after-school programs for sports and the arts is much more difficult than funding for after-the-fact initiatives like a juvenile detention center. Why do you think this is the case, and how do you suggest we address this unfortunate reality?
Great question. And I'm gonna help you out with my name.
Please do. I tried to get it right before. McQuell?
My name is Mike Quell.
MyQuell. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you, sir. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
Historically, of course, government fund after the fact activities, prisons, juvenile detention centers and stuff like that, because careers are made by doing so. Careers for people that don't look like us in small towns. And I think our brother Robert Brooks was a victim of that system, having a prison in a small town with correctional officers that don't look like us, that's policing us and abusing us in those systems. I just think, as I agree with everybody when we talk about the grassroots funding, it's always an issue. It's always the biggest barrier to get the outcomes you need, and it's hard to get the data when you don't have the funds to provide the service in the community. And as a grassroots nonprofit executive director myself, that's something that we struggle with all the time. We have been a grassroots organization since 2017. Became a 501c3 in 2021. Funding is an issue. I think in Rochester, one of the issues that we have is that funding is political. When they have these RFPs, the community and the grassroots organizations don't know sometimes that the RFP exists until the last minute. But the people that's at the table that can allocate those resources, they're able to tell their partners, their community allies, their friends that this RFP is available and hurry up and submit. But by the time it gets to you as a grassroots executive director, you got a week left to do an RFP that's very lengthy and asks a lot of questions. I just think that to combat that, what we need to do as grassroots organizations, we need to figure out how we can create partnerships so that we can begin to share resources. For an example, if you're a grassroots organization and you was awarded $150,000 or $250,000, we got to figure out how can you pick 2 or 3 other organizations that you can support them that can do part of the work for $30,000 of the funding or for $25,000 of the funding. And then some of the mid-level organizations can also pick and create partnerships with smaller grassroots organizations to share the resources. I think that that's going to become very important so that these grassroots organizations don't always have to rely on funders, because we have a lot of organizations competing for small dollars. If there is a funder that has that's given $25,000 to a certain amount of nonprofits. You got 100 nonprofits that's applying for those funds. So I think that the resources is scarce in itself, but I think by creating partnerships and sharing resources, I think that that'll be more helpful to the community.
That's very true, Mr. Powell. As we move into 2025, Project 2025, that's one of the areas where there's a strong focus on the need for particularly not-for-profits to come together and collaborate. And I think having that mindset and thinking and strategizing what that may look like is going to become a new way of doing business and thriving for not-for-profit organizations. So you're definitely on point with that.
One last point really quick. I think that we should create the culture to where funders expect that. When funders is saying, okay, well, we're going to put out an RFP, we want to fund this, and it's going to be a certain amount of dollars, they should be able to allow organizations to write in 2 or 3 other smaller organizations to do part of the work. And I think that that'll be helpful as well.
And that would be a question for some of your big foundations. And as we move forward to have those conversations, United Way, ES&L, some of the other funders and the county, and to start having those conversations if they haven't already begun to take place. The last question that I have is, the title of this panel centers on violence prevention as opposed to focusing on anti-violence. You are all experts in your own way. Tell us what you see as the major systemic and personal measures that need to be taken for us to have a city that embraces public safety at the individual, family, and societal levels. I'll start with Mr. French.
Thank you so much for that question. So as a city that truly embraces public safety, it requires, again, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but requires a dual focus on systemic reform and community level engagement. At the systemic level, public safety must prioritize equity and access to resources, really looking at investing in education, housing, obviously healthcare, mental health services, to essentially address the root causes of violence, right? Strong community police relationships, transparency in the justice system, and policies that emphasize restorative justice over punitive measures are critical, right? Obviously holding people accountable, but how can we restore them back to the community, right? How can we hold them close when they do wrong and not necessarily push them away? Right, on a personal level, it's about fostering that responsibility that I just mentioned and empowering within our families and individuals, right? Giving the people that autonomy and that ownership of the situation that they're experiencing. These things aren't just happening to you. You're not victim of circumstance, but they're happening with you and with your input. And they're part of the solution. They're part of the planning process. Right. This obviously again includes mentorship programs, accessing vocational training with the CTE. That's something I'm doing with the Defenders of Tomorrow program. The students that are involved with that, they're actually getting CTE credits. Essentially just creating opportunities for our youth to see a future beyond just the constraints of the systemic inequities. Public safety isn't just about reacting to violence. It's about being preventive. It's about building a sense of belonging, dignity, and hope in our communities.
I like that. Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, just a couple things. Kudos to the governor of New York State. We actually are funding youth sports now. The county money runs through us, and we're able to give folks who never had support an opportunity to do stuff. I would say a couple things. To that end, when you do receive money, do the work that needs to be done. We need our young people to hear positive messages. If you got whatever sport, I'll pick on my sport. If you're doing football and you got these young men and young ladies, then have those conversations with them. They look up and believe in coaches. They have relationships that allow coaches to get young people to do things that they would not even do for their own parents. As a dad, I had to use a coach to help me. So I would just say, people, if we do get this money, when we do get it, do the work. I would just say old school outreach. to organizations. We need to get out into the community. They need to get to a place where they see your face, they know who you are, they know what you offer. It's so many voices on the internet, social media, but your voice may not rise up high enough where our families know that your opportunity, your resource is there for them. So I love when I see folks like Rise Up Rochester go out and do community peace walks, shake hands, talk to folks in our community so that we can build those relationships, build the trust. And then finally, I would go back to what we talked about, Ms. Thomas, building a network of communication. We have to come together as professionals, as people who care about our community, who provide service. You go whatever list you want to go with, but you know what I love about sports is they have a way of being organized, precise, timely, and getting it done. You know, when we play sports, we didn't, hey, run a play and everybody jump out there and run the play. As a community, we got to run the same play. We got to be talking and sharing information so that we can, give our young people the best opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. True, this panel of allowing young leaders to emerge, because it's the youth of today that's going to take us to tomorrow. And if we don't allow the space and voice and the coaching and the mentoring, then we'll be further behind as a community. So it's very, very important that we continue that, to make sure that we keep the voice of the youth. Mr. Powell.
Yes, I think that one of the things that can help with violence prevention is local government, City Hall, the mayor's office, the police department. They got to figure out a way of how, whatever their plan is, they first of all, need a comprehensive anti-violence plan, right? And then they also need to be able to share that with the community to create some type of buy-in. Because what happens is you have government, local government coming up with policies and procedures and things that they want to do to address crime, but the community don't know what they're doing. They don't know their techniques. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. All that they see is sometimes a lot of police in the community, right? But they don't know that that's a tactic that they're using, is a gang in the area, and they're going to have to deploy a lot of police to address that. Only thing we see is just police everywhere. But they got to have some type of way to, if they're doing something like that. And this is just for an example, is that they're reaching out to the community saying, hey, you might see an increase in police, but this is the reason why we're doing it. And then from Friday to Sunday, this is when you're going to see it. Right. And then that way, the community will know how to respond to that. And that's just an example. But you got to have buy-in with the community because it's just not going to be law enforcement that make the community safe. It's also going to have to be ordinary Rochesterians too that buy into the same program to where we all working together to create a safe Rochester.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I will say that as I was focusing on preparation for this panel discussion, I was happy to see the collaboration across systems, looking at violence prevention and the criminal justice. I think that, as was mentioned about the HCBU this summer, that was huge. That was the beginning of collaboration and bringing the community together. So I think while small steps, and even with the latest recruitment for the RPD, to see the increase in number of people of color that are going through that process. So I see that, I feel like the things that are happening, the things that we've been talking about as a community, it's starting to take some substance that people are starting to hear and starting to move. And we know that it's not going to happen overnight, but I think if we continue to voice and come together as a community, that we can make progress towards where the better good for our community, our youth at large. So, Mr. Underwood, Tony, did you have your hand up? Were you going to say anything? Is there, I'll turn it over to Mr. Underwood.
Well, not just
Just,
yet. You don't get to go just yet.
yes,
But there was again, thank you, panelists. There's a question that I think could be for everyone
okay,
in the chat, in the Q&A rather. And if you have more questions, we have about 10 minutes or so.
okay.
Are there any, and this is a question, are there any faith-based leaders involved in youth violence prevention? This can be for the entire panel. Let me repeat it. Are there any faith-based leaders involved in youth violence prevention? I would add that you're aware of.
I can speak to that real quick if I can. I'm
Mhm.
not aware of any. I know that there are some faith-based communities that have ministries out of their church that focus on faith-based, like Rock the Peace, for an example, come from First Genesis Church. And when I talk about nonprofits working together and sharing resources, I failed to mention that the church as well should be a part of that process. The church should also connect with local grassroots nonprofits so that they can also work together and share resources, because I look at both of them with the ministries from the churches and the grassroots work. I believe, my personal opinion, that is both God's work that you're doing. So if we can figure out a way to create partnerships and work together with the church and the grassroots organizations, I think that that'd be more impactful than doing it in solidarity with our own organizations.
Yeah, I would just say Officer Moses Robinson works with the church leaders and does some good work around prevention with young people. And then I would just say many of our churches throughout the community offer youth programs. And to the point of what Brother Underwood said, prevention is, programming. And I think Mr. Powell said, getting kids attention at a young age so that as they develop and grow into their teen years, that they're already involved and engaged in positive things in our community. But I would just add this comment, just making sure once again that the churches engage youth outside their congregations for families who may not bring kids to church, that may not been their experience growing up. And there's a few churches I know that will have their doors open to young people in the community. But they are some churches definitely doing good work in prevention.
And there's also churches that I know that support the youth in the detention center that come and offer support. And that's also feeds back into the community, because they do provide a lot of support, emotional, social support for young people that are in the detention center. So that is part of the faith-based community in giving back. Church of Love has been consistent for a couple years to provide that support. And it also goes beyond just the youth, also for the families as well.
Yeah, and also just to chime in real quick, Kathy, I know it was already kind of mentioned already that a lot of churches are doing that. Like I know Pastor Singletary church as well. Pastor Singletary, I'm sorry. He has a literacy program called Help Me Read. And then even Cleanna Florence, Pastor Clifford Florence and Franklin Florence's granddaughter has Let's Get Lit. Those things, like those are the initiatives. It's not just about violence prevention and mentoring, but it's also helping individuals access their potential through literacy. Right. Oftentimes we find a lot of violence happening because students are not reading. Right. We see the data. We see it come out of RCSD. Like that's a major focus, and that's kind of like foundational. So really connecting with individuals from the UCLM and other organizations that are not even part of that collective, but really helping individuals by giving them the tools they need to be resourceful and self-efficacy.
Mr. Jordan, there's a question, and maybe you could answer this. Is there any opportunities to get involved with youth to volunteer? Was one of the questions.
Absolutely. Organizations like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Compeer, we're developing a young men's mentoring program with the YMCA, have mentoring programs for boys, girls, for kids in care. And it doesn't take a lot of time. We're talking now, mentoring can be done on the phone with a check-in call, once a month live visit. They got all kinds of opportunities to make it easy for you to engage a child one-to-one, group mentoring. Our centers have opportunities for volunteers, for coaches, you name it. But if you do get stuck and someone's looking to volunteer, I'm at the Rochester Monroe County Youth Bureau. Please give me a call. Be patient with me. Call me twice if I don't call you back, because we need mentors. We need
Because you're busy.
people. Hey, I'm not sitting here watching cable TV. I'm trying to work, but yeah, there's so many opportunities to support young people. Hey, Mr. Underwood and ABC have youth programming, and they do some good work. You can reach right out to them. It's so many people trying to do good work, and we just need to get that information out to our community.
And I think to that point, and we still need more. And I think Mike Well said it, not only the more, but to coordinate the more, because there's no one way to do it. There, because our young people, and we heard from them last week, and we heard from Azad, they have a wide variety of interests. And it's our obligation, I think, for us to nurture those interests, because they are working on things that haven't been invented yet. I'll put it that way. you know, because Tony, Kathy, I think the three of us can say we've seen some stuff happen in our lifetime that we're going, what? In the past 30 years. So whatever young people have, and Tony, you said this, you really gotta love our young people, you know, and don't fake the funk, because they can snuff you out in like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they could smell fake from, last week. So that honesty that we need with them, and I'll never forget this, and I'll say his name. You all may have heard of him. This gentleman his name is Bill Johnson, and he said something in January of 1992 that I'll never forget. He was CEO of the Urban League at the time, and he was the keynote speaker at the African American Leadership Development first class, inaugural class. And it was at that pretty much ceremony that he announced that he was going to run for mayor. But relative to what we're talking about, in that speech, he said the following: youth are 50% of the population, but they are 100% of the future. Anything we do should not only take them into consideration, but seek their input on it. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And I've been so guided by that since then. That's 32 years ago. And every time I see him, I say, you remember? He's like, don't say it again. I said, but yeah, it's such sound advice, because if we're allowed to be here for the next 20 years, it's those 20-year-olds who are going to be running things. And I told Isaiah, I said, when I have my cup stuck out, don't kick it out my hand. Put something in it, you know, because they're going to know, because they're loyal on most storefronts,
Right.
and the people who are giving them bad advice, guess what? They're loyal to them too, so only light can take away darkness, and we have to flood the zone with the light. And I'm so grateful for you, Michael, for you, Vincent. I'm meeting you today. Tony, we've been rolling for a minute or 12, and Kathy, we've just been soldiers in this work. But it's trying to make space for people like Michael. So I'm glad you were able to fit us in, Michael, because like we said, you've been busy. But we want to make sure we nurture what you're doing and to support that as well. So thank you, all of you, for just giving time for this very, very important thing. And I want to close with some comments, because we do have a few minutes. We're going to close with a racial healing circle and belonging, because this conference has been, it's heavy right now in our community. And we recognize that. And a big part of the heaviness is what happened to Robert Brooks. That's like raw. right
Yeah.
now. So I want to have each of you give a, including you, Kathy, give a few closing comments and how that impacts you. And let's start with you, Michael.
Yes, it impacts me because it the situation with Robert Brooks, and may God bless his soul and his family, um because it reinforced trauma for me. I was myself in the New York State Department of Corrections. I spent 6 years there from the age of 21 all the way until the age of 27. So when I was able to see the video myself, it brought back so many memories of, and I just was propelled to say on my social media that I wanted everybody to know that the instance that happened to Mr. Brooks, it happens every single day. That was one of my worst fears when I was incarcerated. I wasn't scared of none of the other inmates. If they was from New York City, Brooklyn, and that didn't fear me. The fear that I had was getting into a confrontation with a correctional officer and not making it home. So that was very traumatic for me personally. And I'm just saddened because I feel like they robbed Mr. Brooks of something that I value today. They robbed Mr. Brooks of the opportunity to have a second chance. And I believe that everybody, no matter what you did, no matter what you was incarcerated for, I believe that everybody, the bare minimum, deserved the opportunity to have a second chance and to get it right. And unfortunately, that brother never get a chance to do that.
Thank you.
Vincent?
Yeah. So situation with Robert Brooks, it was again, I send my condolences to the family and all that knew him. Actually, my brother, when it happened, my brother called me from Ohio. I was like, "Do you remember him from Douglas? Like, we were in Blue House together. He was in the Delta Sigma Theta Jabberwock together." And I was like, "Man, I vaguely remember. Like, yeah, he won Prince with Sita, the kingship, and he won. My sister won the." So I'm just like, man, like I just don't remember him, but my brother did. And at the end of the day, and my condolences to all. And it's just a stark reminder, though, of the challenges faced by individuals, particularly our Black and Brown men, navigating the criminal justice system. And again, it's not just about one man. I know everyone, you hear all the stuff about it. It's not just the one man, but it's what his experience represents to so many across the community, as Michael mentioned, not just here in New York State, but across the nation. Right? When the story broke, you heard a lot of other people chime me up with similar situations, or both from those that are incarcerated, but also those that are entrusted in policing that space. They themselves wanted to come out and speak on it, but out of fear. So it's definitely a reminder that we need to do better. That we need to do better, and that's all I will say right there.
Tony?
Yes, I would just say, once again, other panelists mentioned condolences to the family and all that knew him. For me, I would say personally, uh, when you work with children, my life has been rich. This is what I got to do with my life. And every time we have a young person that the system um, has to deal with, and now we have turned over our opportunity to someone else. It's hurtful. As a competitive person, it's a loss for all of us, because what and where did we go wrong, and what do we need to do as a community, I guess, in the prevention realm, but from a social justice realm of what Mr. Powell is working on in our community. So it's very difficult for me because I take it as a personal, we failed. And when I go to the detention center, and see them boys and know how we failed them, we can't do that. Community, we can't.
Tony. Kathy, take that mute button, Kathy. We got a remedial class for you. It's all right.
My heart is weighted. Anyone knows me knows my passion for working with young people in my time at the detention center, how painful it was for me to see them coming through that door. And my prayer and my words was, if I can just save one, then my work has been done. Because as Mr. Jordan says, somewhere along the way, somebody failed them. That's the way, and I'll stand on that. Somebody failed them. So when I saw what happened to Mr. Ricks, my heart went out because I have received several calls from parents and also people incarcerated that had shared with me that experience, not to the level of losing their life, but what can I do? Who can I call? Who can I call? And a lot of the comments that said, well, you call the commission, they said, yeah, well, we don't have a report. I can validate all of that, all of that. So it's my hope and my prayer that on the shoulders of Mr. Brooks, that real change will come for those that are in that system, that come through that system, that encounter that system. As a mother of two sons, I pray every day that they don't have to go through that system. Ashe.
Ashe. Thank you once again to this amazing panel. Thank you for the time that you've put into it. Thank you for the advice that you're giving us. A lot of what has been said throughout this conference and certainly in the past hour is actionable. You know, and as I said this morning out the panel, first name right over my head is action. And I'm so glad that our organization is focused on that. So trust and believe that there will be some follow-up to this because this conference, as we say, is the launch of our social justice work for the year. And the ideas and thoughts and suggestions and innovation that we've gotten from all the panelists and the keynote, and again, there's going to be a follow-up to the keynote, stand by for that, guides our work because we don't know everything. We know some things, but we work best with other people. And so many times, I think the word that was probably repeated most in these 2 days of this conference is relationships. High quality relationships. It is part of our theory of change to find people who have a similar ethos with respect to how we view the world and what I call the fact that there's no hierarchy of human being. Nobody has any stripes. We're all one. But we know that things are off balance sometimes, and we need to work to get things back to balance, which is where equity comes in. So again, to the panelists, thank you so much. And this particular panel and every panel before it sets up what we're going to do now.